The heavy obsidian blade whistled toward Alara's throat, but it never connected. A blur of gray fabric and matte black plating intercepted the strike, the screech of metal on metal echoing through the breached panic room. Kalen Thorne stood between the archon and the Gorgonian giant, his posture entirely transformed. If you want to discover how a simple cadet becomes the galaxy's most lethal shadow, subscribe now to unlock the full archive of the Wraith. Let us step back to see where the mask first began to slip. 3 hours earlier, the most pressing concern for Kalen had been a flickering light fixture in the secondary comms hub. He had fumbled with his toolkit, dropping a hydrospanner at Alara's feet as she swept past in her shimmering silks. The Star of Ethelgard hummed with the quiet arrogance of seraphim design, a vessel of white marble and gold filigree that seemed more cathedral than starship. Alara didn't look at the cadet as he scrambled to retrieve his tool. To her, the Terrans were a necessary inconvenience, a species of frantic, short-lived children hired to manage the mundane vibrations of the ship's lower systems. She saw only the grease smudge on his cheek and the slight tremor in his hands. When the shift ended, Kalen didn't head to the mess hall. He slipped into Maintenance Bay 4, a cavernous space filled with the smell of scorched copper and recycled air. He stripped off the loose-fitting gray uniform, revealing a body that told a different story than his clumsy service record. Thick, white lines of scar tissue crisscrossed his back, reminders of atmospheric entries without a chute and close quarters work in the belt. He reached into a concealed locker and pulled out a small, jagged piece of obsidian. It was a sharpening stone, ancient and worn smooth in the center. He ran the edge of a collapsible vibroblade along the stone, the rhythmic shick-shick-shick the only sound in the dark. "I am not a child playing with toys," he whispered to the shadows, his voice devoid of the stutter he used on the bridge. "I am the shadow that waits for the monster." The ship suddenly bucked. A localized gravity distortion slammed the Star of Ethelgard, followed by the muffled roar of hull breach sirens. Kalen didn't panic. He moved with a predatory grace that would have been unrecognizable to Alara, snapping his secret earpiece into place. The obsidian drifters had arrived. They didn't signal. They simply tore into the ship's belly with boarding harpoons. From his position in the bay, Kalen watched the internal sensors on his wristlink flicker. The Seraphim guards were being systematically slaughtered in the corridors, their elegant weapons no match for the raw, brutal velocity of the Gorgonian boarders. Kalen Thorne stood alone in the center of the main corridor, a blood-slicked blade in each hand, facing 17 of the galaxy's most feared killers with a terrifying, icy calm. If you find yourself holding your breath for the underdog, subscribe to ensure you never miss a moment of the human retaliation. Kalen moved. He didn't run toward the bridge. He moved toward the highborn quarters. He knew the drifters would head for the Archon first. He bypassed a squad of boarders by scaling the environmental piping, his movements silent and fluid. He reached the guest wing just as a Gorgonian behemoth kicked in the door to Alara's panic room. The Archon was backed into a corner, her ceremonial staff glowing with a pale, useless light. She looked at the monster, then at the gray-clad cadet who suddenly appeared in the doorway. The galaxy looked at Terrans and saw prey, Kalen thought, sliding the sharpening stone into a pocket of his combat vest. They never thought to look for the Reapers in the gray uniforms. The Gorgonians' roar was a physical weight, a wall of sound that shook the filigree from the ceiling, but Kalen didn't flinch. He flowed forward, the sharpening stone forgotten in his pocket as his focus narrowed to the lethal mechanics of the kill. He didn't fight like a soldier. He fought like an environmental hazard. He used the monster's momentum against it, sliding beneath its massive reach and driving a vibroblade through the soft seal of its knee joint. As the giant buckled, Kalen surged upward, his armored shoulder shattering the creature's lower jaw before finishing the work with a precise, surgical strike to the neck. Alara watched, her breath hitching in a throat that had only ever known the taste of nectar and clean oxygen. The clumsy boy who had dropped his wrench was gone. In his place stood a Reaper in matte black plating, his eyes cold and distant as the void itself. 47 of us in existence, he said. his voice a low rasp over the suit's external speakers as he offered her a hand slicked with dark ichor. And 47 is exactly enough to end this war. He didn't wait for her to thank him. He pulled her into the corridor, moving toward the primary junction where the ship's heartbeat, the main reactor, was being choked by drifter sabotage. Every corner revealed a new horror. Squads of elite hunters moving with predatory confidence. Every time Kalen dismantled them, he was a ghost in the machinery, a blur of motion that left nothing but silence in its wake. He led the small group of survivors to the main corridor, a long, vaulted stretch of marble that had become a killing floor. 17 elite hunters stood between them and the engine room. They were the drifters' finest, draped in the bones of fallen species, their weapons humming with dark energy. Kalen stepped forward, alone. He didn't look like a hero. He looked like a shadow that had finally run out of patience. He reached into his belt and pulled a small silver cylinder, a blinding trap of Terran design. "Tell your masters to be afraid," he thought as he triggered the device, "for the humans have stopped hiding." The world turned white. In the screaming brilliance, Kalen was the only thing that moved. He was a scalpel in the dark, systematically removing the threats one by one. By the time the light faded and the smoke cleared, only their leader, Varric, remained standing, pinned to the bulkhead by a blade through his shoulder. Kalen leaned in close, whispering the message that would soon travel across the stars, before letting the creature live to carry the fear home. When the reinforcements finally arrived at Zenith Station, the atmosphere was different. The star of Ethelgard was scarred, its gold leaf peeled away to reveal the cold, hard steel beneath. Alara stood on the observation deck, watching the Terran cadet walk across the docking bay. He was back in his humble, ill-fitting gray uniform, his posture once again hesitant and unremarkable. But as he passed, the most warlike species in the quadrant, the Kraul, the Xylos, the ancient protectors, stepped aside. They didn't just move, they bowed. They had seen the footage. They knew that beneath the clumsy exterior lived a survivalist that made their own legends look like bedtime stories. Alara looked down at her hand. She was still holding the small, jagged sharpening stone Kalen had dropped during the final push to the engines. It was heavy, rough, and entirely without ornament, much like the humans themselves. It had been the tool that kept his blades sharp enough to save her life, and now it was a weight she would carry forever. The galaxy would never look at a gray uniform the same way again. The balance of power hadn't just shifted. It had been shattered by a boy with a toolkit and a shadow. The sharpening stone felt warm against her palm, a grounded reminder that while the Seraphim built cathedrals, the humans built the walls that kept the monsters out. If you're ready to see what happens when the galaxy's most underestimated species finally stops holding back, subscribe for tomorrow's chronicle. What would you do if you realized your quietest neighbor was actually your strongest protector?